My name is Elena Vivienne Mercer, and I'm 26. I used to think love was something you could outperform. Do the right things, say the right words, stay patient long enough, and the person you picked would finally pick you back. Then I met Eric Lang and, if I'm honest, his ex-girlfriend, Veronica Steele. Fine, if you don't like it, find someone else, Eric said once, casual as a shrug. Already did, I replied. I watched the expression melt off his face like frost in sunlight. But that's the end of a story that starts much earlier, with 1,000 little cuts disguised as inside jokes. 3 years together, and Eric had grown comfortable. The kind of comfortable where he'd invite Veronica to our anniversary dinner because we're just friends now. I'd open my mouth to explain how friendship doesn't usually come with midnight selfies and a caption that reads, "Miss this view," and then close it because I didn't want to be the jealous girlfriend in my own relationship. "You're being paranoid," he'd say when I clocked their late-night texting sessions. "She's practically family." Brothers don't send ab pics at 12:03 a.m. I didn't say that part. I swallowed it with cold pasta while he stepped outside for 5 minutes that stretched into 20, laughing into a phone that wasn't calling me. The signs were there from the beginning. Veronica was the ghost at every feast, the name that cameoed in every story about his past. During our first months, Eric romanticized their history, like a movie he half believed he could reboot if the studio ever called. "We had this insane connection," he'd say. "It was just bad timing." I told myself I'd been cast in the lead anyway. Look, I'm here, she's not. So why was I measuring myself against someone not even in the room? 6 months in, at a candlelit dinner I'd saved for, his phone buzzed. He glanced down and lit up like someone had handed him a future. "V got the promotion," he announced, already tapping back. "I should call." "Now?" I asked. "During our anniversary?" "It'll take 5 minutes." 5 minutes became 20. The pasta cooled. My chest did too. When he returned, he squeezed my hand like a promise. "Sorry," she was just excited to share it with me. "Why you specifically?" I asked. "We're close. We tell each other everything." That's when I learned something essential. I wasn't dating Eric. I was maintaining him, keeping the space tidy until Veronica came home. By our first anniversary, the pattern calcified. Veronica's name ambushed our dates like a push notification. When we went out with his friends, he updated everyone on her life. New projects, new apartment, new haircut, new drama. I finally said, "You talk about her a lot." "She's going through a hard time," he said, defensive. "Good friends support each other." "Do you talk to her about me that much?" The pause was the answer. "That's different," he said. "She doesn't know you." Translation. Veronica's life was interesting in ways mine wasn't. Her problems outranked my presence. She got the emotional budget. I got the receipts. Year 2 is when the story warped. Veronica moved back to our city, took a job downtown, and the ghost grew skin. "Coffee with V," he'd text mid-afternoon, helping V pick a couch. "Swinging by V's housewarming, be late." "I should meet her," I said, smiling with my teeth, "since she's important to you." "You'll love her," he said. Something in his voice made it sound like a dare. When I finally met Veronica at a group happy hour, the problem announced itself without dialogue. She was tall, radiant, the kind of woman who treats a room like a stage and still makes everyone feel like they have the best seat. Worse, she and Eric spoke fluent history. Their private jokes were a shorthand I couldn't read. I watched Eric animate around her, funnier, looser, lit from within, and realized with slow, nauseous clarity that this was who he believed he was. With me, he was gentled down, not lit up. "Different how?" he asked later when I said he changed around her. "Happier? More myself?" He brushed his teeth too long, then finally said, "She brings out my playful side. We have history." "And what do I bring out?" He dried his hands. "Stability, comfort. Every woman's dream. To be the orthopedic shoe of a man's love life." I should have left then. Instead, at 26, I decided love meant earning a devotion he gave Veronica for free. I tried to be more charming, more spontaneous, even more Veronica-ish, in ways that embarrassed me in private. I planned elaborate dates and surprise weekends. I bought boutique flowers and learned to cook his mother's bolognese. He rolled his eyes at the reservations I pulled strings to get. He complained I was trying too hard. Meanwhile, Veronica sent a 2-word meme and he beamed like summer. The breaking point should have been Napa. I'd saved for months. Resort, tastings, couples massage, the works. It was supposed to be the trip where we reset the story. Instead, Veronica's grandmother got sick, and Eric spent our entire weekend on the phone, being there for her, researching hospitals in a state I couldn't pronounce. When I asked for 1 hour at dinner, phone-free, he said, "How can you be so selfish? Her grandmother is dying." When my grandmother died 6 months earlier, he sent flowers. He did not build me a war room. I started to understand the difference between being a girlfriend and being a priority. Last month, he crossed a line I didn't know could exist on a map labeled Basic Respect. For my birthday, I'd rented a cabin 2 hours north, packed his favorite wine, and, God help the naive, I'd bought a ring. I'd told myself that commitment would fix us. A ring would move me from stable to chosen. I tucked the box into my sock drawer where dreams go to wait. Friday morning, he called. "Veronica's going through a really rough breakup," he said. "I invited her to the cabin. She needs support." "You invited your ex-girlfriend to my birthday weekend?" "This is bigger than a birthday." Bigger than the birthday he'd forgotten last year. Bigger than the plans he'd almost canceled because Veronica had a work crisis. Bigger than the quiet panic I lived with every day, wondering how to ask for something as small as eye contact. Something in me, the piece that always rearranged itself to make space for other people's emergencies, stopped moving. "You know what?" I said, staring at the ring. "You're right. Go. Are you breaking up with me over this?" "No," I said. "I'm just done competing." Silence lengthened until I could hear him breathe. "You're being dramatic," he said at last. "We'll celebrate when I get back." "Will we? Or will Veronica have another crisis that weekend too?" "I don't like what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating it. You've spent 3 years choosing her over me and calling it friendship." "She's just a friend." "No," I said, calm as the closed door. "She's the woman you'd rather be with. I'm the woman you chose because she wasn't available." He hung up. 2 hours later, a text. "V and I are leaving for the cabin. We can talk when I'm back." They posted photos, hiking, s'mores, drinks by the fire, everything I'd planned. Eric looked happy. Veronica looked like home. The comments made my stomach go cold. "You two are so cute. When are you getting back together?" Power couple vibes. No one asked where I was. No one seemed surprised I wasn't there. Everyone could see what I'd been refusing to name. I wasn't Eric's girlfriend. I was his safety net. That weekend, I called someone I hadn't let myself think about in years. Ben Archer, my college friend who once made me laugh so hard my lungs hurt. We'd stayed loosely in touch. He was finishing a master's in architecture, designing sustainable housing. Brilliant, grounded. The kind of man who asks real questions and then listens all the way to the end. "I saw the photos," Ben said when I called. "I'm sorry." "Are you free this weekend?" I asked. I could use a friend. We walked the city. We didn't say Eric's name. Ben told me about a downtown project he loved, how morning light changes a floor plan. He asked about my work, my family, what I wanted 5 years from now that I was too tired to want last year. The way he looked at me, like the subject, not the background, was oxygen. When he kissed me outside a coffee shop, it felt like coming up from underwater. "I've been waiting 3 years for you to know this," he whispered. "Know what?" "That you deserve to be chosen." I went home that night, opened in my sock drawer, and looked at the ring sitting there like a dare. I closed the drawer. I called a friend with a spare truck. I found my boxes. If Eric wanted me to find someone else, I realized, he'd finally given me the map. The Monday after the cabin photos, the office coffee tasted like someone had brewed it with excuses. My screen glowed with deliverables. My phone glowed with what I wasn't going to answer. Eric had texted landed, talk tonight, like we were recapping a work trip and not the weekend he spent reenacting our plans with his ex-girlfriend. At 6:42 p.m., he let himself into my apartment with the key I was already mentally reclaiming. He came in smiling, a peace-offering smile, the kind that expects a fight and plans to win it with charm. "How was your birthday?" he asked, setting down a tote bag of pastries I didn't touch. "You were there," I said, "just not with me." He sighed, like I'd put us both through something. V had a terrible breakup. I couldn't leave her alone. "You didn't," I said. Silence rippled. He looked around, noticed the neat stacks of folded boxes against the wall. I watched the realization pass across his face, too quickly for regret. "What's that?" Clutter, I said. I'm clearing space. For what? For answers. He reached for my hand, and I let him because I wanted to feel the truth of how it felt. Practiced. Familiar. A gesture performed by muscle memory and not conviction. You're my girlfriend, Lena, he said in that voice, the patient one. She's my friend. She's your history. She's not a threat. You don't act like she isn't. He ran a hand through his hair. You're making this bigger than it is. It is big, I said. It's our relationship being small. He asked to prove he was right, the only way he knew, by rescheduling my birthday for Saturday, by listing restaurants I loved, by promising he'd put his phone away. I nodded like a diplomat and said yes to nothing. When he left, I sat on the floor between my boxes until the building settled around me and the night made its ordinary noises. At 9:18, my phone buzzed. Ben walked past vestry. They switched the bulbs over the bar. Somehow it's a different shade of warm. Me. Maybe that's the trick. Same fixtures, new light. Ben. Always has been. I thought about the kiss outside the coffee shop, the gentleness of it, the way it didn't rush me. A yes that didn't demand anything afterward. I pulled the ring box from my drawer and held its weight in my hand. It felt like measuring my own shadow. I didn't open it. Veronica returned to the city the way weather returns, everywhere at once. Eric's calendar gained new entries that looked like errands and read like devotion. V, coffee. V, drop off books. V, help hang frames. He narrated them to me like bullet points in a deck titled, This is Normal. I nodded like a person between flights. On Thursday, we met friends at a rooftop bar. The table cheered when we arrived. People who liked me tried to make it even. 5 minutes later, Veronica breezed in, sunlight in a leather jacket, laughter already cupped in her hands. She hugged Eric first, an extra beat, a shared code. Then me. Air kiss, citrus perfume, the press of somebody who never truly arrives anywhere she doesn't own. Elena, she said brightly. Finally. Finally. If anyone had filmed the evening and muted it, you could have studied the choreography. How he tilted toward her when she spoke, how she finished his stories like a duet, how the silence at the table bent around them as if they were architecture. I set my glass down and aimed my smile where it could do least harm. Later, walking home, I tried for gentleness because that's who I still wanted to be. You change around her, I said. You take up more space. He pocketed his hands. Isn't that a good thing? It's an honest thing. He thought, then nodded as if we'd made a breakthrough together. You bring out stability, he said. Comfort. It should have been a compliment. It sounded like a diagnosis. I pictured a shoe store, sensible flats for reliable women. I slept badly. I dreamed of rooms with too many doors and none with my name on them. The next week, I tried one last time, one more elaborate date because I am sometimes slow to stop bleeding for people who didn't even ask me to bleed. A Thursday night. Tiny tables, a piano, a window view that made the city look gentler than it is. He was almost on time. He was almost present. His phone stayed a face-down rectangle between us, humming once, twice, 3 times. Emergency? I asked finally. He winced, apologetic. V's at the ER with her grandma. Which ER? He blinked. Why? So I can call and ask them to lower the city's anxiety because our romantic evening needs it. He looked wounded. This isn't fair. It hasn't been fair for a long time, I said. He turned the phone over and over in his hand and then put it away like a dog who knows he's supposed to heel and keeps smelling the river anyway. I watched us from above, 2 people in a beautiful room, one of them performing love and the other performing patience, both of them a little bored with their lines. When the check came, I took it. I told him it was my treat, and it was the last one of this kind. He reached for my wrist in the lobby and I let him. Lena, he said, we're fine. We're just in a weird patch. Patches cover holes, I said. They don't fix fabric. I didn't cry on the sidewalk. I didn't even breathe dramatically. I went upstairs and took the ring from the drawer and moved it to the back of the shelf behind the winter scarves. A future can be an object you put farther and farther from your own reach without admitting you're letting it go. My mother called on Saturday, suddenly clairvoyant. Your voice sounds like you're carrying a couch up the stairs alone. I'm reorganizing. Your life or your living room? Yes. She waited. Mothers are built to hold silence open like a door. Do you like who you are with him? She asked finally. The question sat down beside me. I like who I used to think I was with him, I said, but who I am now feels like me with the volume turned down. Don't turn yourself down, Lynn, she said softly. Not for a man who only raises his voice for someone else. After we hung up, I texted Julian, my brother, in this version of my life, still funny, still kind. He replied with a meme about raccoons stealing pizzas and then wrote, "You don't need anyone who needs an audience to see you." I spent the afternoon making a list that wasn't a list. All the things I wanted to feel in a room with the person I loved. Calm, chosen, seen, funny, wanted, fed. I wrote fed twice. At sunset, the sky went the color of forgiveness I hadn't earned yet. Ben texted a photo of a staircase he was sketching. Light wants to travel. Our job is not to stop it. I'm learning not to stop mine, I wrote back. Good, he replied. I'll be here when you need to practice. Practice looked like Tuesdays we didn't label. We met for walks that had destinations we didn't rush to reach. We ate tacos on a curb while the city did its loudest impression of being alive. We talked about work, about his design for a courtyard that pulled wind like a harp string, about my client who thought urgent meant forget I asked. It felt like humming at the right pitch after years of singing over traffic. When he kissed me again, it was the same yes as before, warm, patient, a declaration without a demand. I told him I hadn't ended things with Eric yet. He nodded like a builder marking a load-bearing wall. Then we wait, he said, and we tell the truth. I went home and stood in the doorway of my bedroom as if it were an exhibit in a museum of my own hesitation. Eric's sweatshirt lay on my chair. His razor occupied a corner of my sink like a flag. The ring slept behind scarves. I sat on the floor and let the city sound like weather. On Thursday, Eric texted, "Brunch Sunday? My place? I'll cook." I typed and erased 3 times and then sent, "Sure." He made pancakes like he was auditioning for the role of boyfriend in a commercial that airs during the playoffs. He kissed my forehead and said we'd reset expectations, like that solved anything more than an overbooked calendar. I drank orange juice and counted the minutes he didn't touch his phone. We almost made it to 35. He glanced. His whole body softened around his eyes. "V's grandma is home," he said, relief rolling off him like weather changing. Thank God. "Text her congratulations," I said. "She's been through so much." He didn't hear the part where I had, too. When I left, he hugged me, as if hugs were legally binding. "Dinner Tuesday?" he asked. "I'll let you know," I said. On the sidewalk, my phone buzzed. "Ben, did you eat?" Me. "Pancakes." Ben. "Congratulations and condolences." Me. In that order. I passed a jewelry store I used to press my forehead against mentally. The window was filled with rings that looked like the quietest way to say I choose you. I imagined putting one on for the wrong reasons, and I kept walking. The night the wind changed, it was small. I came home from a late meeting and found Eric on my couch, feet up, remote on his thigh, my spare key glinting on the coffee table. He'd ordered takeout I hadn't asked for. The TV said next episode in 9 seconds. His phone lit the room between us as it faced up on the arm of the couch. The banner across the screen was a preview with Veronica's name and a heart I had never seen from him. The first line of her message was a confession I had suspected and never said out loud. My body went very still. "Hungry?" he asked, looking over. I pointed at the phone. "You're not subtle," I said gently. He flushed, reached for the device, flipped it over like you can make a message unsay itself by changing the angle of light. "It's nothing." "It's never nothing," I said. "It's always everything." He opened his mouth to argue. I stood. Behind the scarves, the ring waited like a closed parenthesis. I didn't touch it. I picked up my boxes instead and carried them into the room like punctuation. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Choosing a tense," I said. Passed. He laughed once, not unkindly, but baffled. "Lena, be reasonable." I stacked a second box. "I have been," I said, "for 3 years." He stared at me as if I'd changed languages. Maybe I had. Maybe this was me, finally speaking fluent self. My phone buzzed on the counter. "Ben, here if you need a quiet. Or soup. Your call." I looked at Eric. At the overturned phone. At the room where I'd learned how small a person can make herself while still technically occupying space. "Tuesday dinner?" he asked, voice small for the first time. "I'll let you know," I repeated. And this time I knew I wouldn't. 3 days later, the ring was back in its box, the box back in its drawer, and I was back in a version of my life that looked intact if you didn't stare too hard. Eric texted good mornings, good nights, and the kind of half-hearted emojis you send when you're performing normal. I matched his energy. Lukewarm replies, polite questions, silence that sounded like civility. I was already gone. He just hadn't noticed yet. The first real crack came with a familiar name and a predictable excuse. Eric. V's having a tough week. Thinking of taking her to dinner. She needs a friend. Me. Sure, she usually does. He didn't reply. That was the rhythm now, me responding with quiet truth, him avoiding it. But then he did something new. He suggested we take a little trip to reset. No phones, no distractions, just us, he said over coffee. The same coffee I'd brewed, the same cup he'd left lipstick marks on that weren't mine once, though I pretended not to notice. I almost laughed. He was recycling my own plan, my cabin, my birthday weekend, the one he'd spent with Veronica instead of me. Where? I asked. He shrugged. The lake. I'll book something nice. Make it up to you. There it was again. Make it up to you, as if love was an overdraft account, and he just needed to deposit a little effort to restore balance. Let me think about it, I said. But I already knew my answer. That weekend, I met Ben for coffee again. It was raining, the city smudged with silver light. He was sketching on a napkin. Some roofline curved like a question mark. You look tired, he said. I'm rehearsing my exit. He put the pen down. Does he know? Not yet. He thinks he can fix what he broke by borrowing my own plans. Ben leaned back, studying me like he was mapping out load-bearing beams. You're allowed to leave before the structure collapses. I know. He hesitated. And when you do, what then? I don't know, I said truthfully. I just know I can't stay where I'm not seen. He nodded once, quiet understanding in the space between us. Then start packing. By Friday, the decision felt clean. Eric texted, Cabin's booked. 2 nights, just us. I'll pick you up at 8. I stared at the message until the dots disappeared. Then I opened my dresser, pulled out the ring box, and held it one last time. I'd bought it thinking permanence could fix neglect, that a ring could make someone love me louder. But all it had ever done was whisper a lie. When he arrived, the smile on his face was unearned. Ready? He asked, keys in hand. For what? He blinked. For us. For the cabin. I'm not going, I said. He laughed like it was a joke that hadn't landed. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not going, I repeated. Go without me. You're good at that. His mouth tightened. This again? This always, I corrected. You've been with her more than me lately. Emotionally, anyway. Maybe physically, too. I stopped checking. His eyes flashed. Don't start. I'm finishing, I said. He tried to close the distance between us, but I stepped back. You think this trip erases everything? The phone calls, the texts, the way you light up when she walks into a room? I've spent 3 years watching you audition for her attention while calling me stable. You know what that really means? It means boring, replaceable, background noise. That's not fair, he said quietly. No, I said, it's accurate. Silence stretched between us. For once, he didn't have a counter-argument. No well-rehearsed apology or clever deflection. Just quiet. He exhaled. You're being dramatic. I smiled faintly. Maybe, or maybe I'm finally being honest. His phone buzzed on the counter. He didn't have to check it. I already knew who it was. I reached for my bag, slung it over my shoulder. Tell Veronica I said hi. Elena? You said I could find someone else if I didn't like it, I interrupted. I took your advice. What does that mean? You'll find out soon enough. I left him standing in my apartment, phone still buzzing like a heartbeat that belonged to someone else. That night, I stayed at Ben's. Not as lovers, not yet. Just as 2 people who understood what quiet really meant. He didn't ask for details, just handed me tea and a blanket. I told him to go, I said eventually. Ben nodded. And? He will, he always does. Good, he said simply. Let him go where he belongs. For the first time in years, I slept without checking my phone. 2 days later, photos appeared again. The same cabin, the same smiles. Veronica and Eric, side by the fire. I looked at them for exactly 10 seconds before deleting every reminder I had left. Messages, photos, the playlist we made when love still sounded like music. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It just felt over. That was the scariest part. Not the heartbreak, but the calm. A week later, he came back to my apartment. No call, no warning, just the sound of his knuckles against my door like memory-demanding entry. I opened it because I needed to see how small his voice would sound once he realized I wasn't waiting anymore. Elena, please, he started, the word almost breaking. It wasn't what you think. She needed closure. So did I said, but you never stuck around long enough to give it. I love you. Maybe, I said, but you loved her more. He shook his head, stepping forward, eyes desperate. You can't just throw away 3 years. I'm not throwing them away, I said. I'm releasing them. He stared at me, the realization dawning too late. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the ring box, and pressed it into his hand. I bought this when I thought love was something you could fix with proof, but proof without presence is nothing. Elena. Keep it, I said softly. You'll probably need it again. He opened his mouth, but I was already closing the door. That night, Ben texted, I made soup, the good kind. I smiled. I'll bring the bread. When I got to his apartment, the lights were low, the air warm. He looked up from the stove, a quiet question in his eyes. You really did it, he said. I really did. How does it feel? Like breathing without flinching. He nodded, poured wine, and said nothing else. We ate in silence. That wasn't empty. When I reached for his hand across the table, he didn't pull away. No speeches, no promises, just two people sitting in the wreckage of old expectations, finding something gentle growing where everything else had burned. It wasn't fireworks. It was peace. And peace, I realized, is what love sounds like when it stops apologizing for being quiet. I used to think endings came with fanfare. Raised voices, slamming doors, something cinematic enough to mark the moment. But mine arrived quietly, in a bowl of lentil soup, and the way Ben didn't ask me to explain anything. He just passed me a spoon and said, eat before it gets cold. And I did. For the first time in years, I ate something warm without guilt curling in my stomach. When he finally spoke again, it wasn't about Eric or Veronica. It was about skylights. The way light falls changes how people move through a room, he said, tracing a shape on the table. If it lands right, even small spaces can feel open. I looked at him, realizing he wasn't talking about architecture anymore. He was talking about me. Over the next few weeks, my life reshaped itself around quiet choices. I changed my number, deleted shared accounts, moved the rest of my things from the apartment that never really felt like mine. Eric texted from new numbers. Apologies, explanations, bargaining dressed as remorse. I didn't respond. Veronica posted photos of sunsets with captions about healing. I didn't look twice. And Ben? He never pushed, never tried to fill the silence with promises he couldn't keep. He just showed up, steady, present, the way gravity shows up for planets. One night I asked him, why are you being so patient? He smiled, slow and unhurried, because you've spent enough time being rushed. We started seeing each other more often. Tuesday coffees turned into Saturday mornings at the farmer's market. His place smelled like cedar and paper, and sometimes garlic when he cooked. He asked about my work, my friends, the book I hadn't finished reading because I'd forgotten what free time felt like. He listened, really listened, not like he was waiting for his turn to speak. One night, while he drafted blueprints, I sat beside him sketching floor plans of my own life, things I wanted that had nothing to do with romance, a weekend in the mountains, a new camera lens, sleep, peace. When he looked over and saw what I was doing, he didn't laugh. He just said, that's a good foundation. It was almost midnight when my phone buzzed again. Eric, you've made your point. Can we just talk? Eric, I miss you. Eric, she doesn't get me like you do. I stared at the words, the same words I used to beg to hear, and felt nothing. Not anger, not longing, just emptiness, clean and quiet like a cleared desk. I turned off the phone and placed it face down. Ben glanced up from his papers. Bad timing? He asked gently. Perfect timing, I said. He nodded and went back to sketching. The hum of his pencil against paper was steadier than any heartbeat I'd ever leaned on. The next morning, I woke to a message from him, a simple photo of sunlight streaming through his studio window with one line beneath it. Light falls better when you stop standing in your own way. That line lived in my head all day. By evening, I found myself walking to his building, nerves tangled with certainty. He opened the door, wearing paint-smeared sweats and that same quiet smile. Hi, I said. Hi. Can I come in? You already are. And I was. We didn't rush. We didn't script it. We talked. We cooked. We watched the sky go from gray to navy, and somewhere between a second glass of wine and a shared laugh, I reached for his hand. It felt like remembering something I'd forgotten I knew, that being wanted doesn't have to feel like being tested. He leaned closer, searching my eyes as if waiting for permission I didn't need to give twice. When he kissed me, it wasn't like fire. It was like warmth after years of cold. Afterward, we sat on the couch, legs tangled, the silence comfortable enough to breathe in. I don't want to be a rebound, he said softly. You're not, I said. You're the reminder. Of what? That love doesn't have to hurt to be real. He smiled at that, the kind of smile that makes you forget how to hold your own walls up. A few days later, Eric showed up at my office, unannounced, desperate, familiar. "Elena, please," he said, blocking the doorway. "You're making a mistake." "The mistake was thinking I could ever win against a memory," I replied. "She's gone," he said quickly. "Veronica's dating someone new. I was stupid, okay? I chose wrong." "You always did." He flinched. "So that's it? 3 years down the drain?" "No," I said, standing. 3 years of lessons. I just finally graduated." He stared at me, trying to find the version of me he used to manipulate. But she was gone. When he finally left, the air in the room felt lighter, like someone had opened a window that had been painted shut. That night, I told Ben about the visit. "Do you regret anything?" he asked. "Only waiting so long to leave." He nodded. "That's how healing works. Slow until it's sudden." I smiled, kind of like us. He reached over, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "No, we've been happening quietly for years." It wasn't fireworks, it wasn't revenge. It wasn't even closure in the dramatic sense. It was something better. Peace. A love built on stillness, not noise. And in that stillness, I found the one thing I never had with Eric, the feeling of being chosen, not out of guilt or convenience, but out of clarity. The kind of choice that doesn't waver when ghosts come knocking. The kind that stays. It happened on a Thursday. The kind of evening that looks ordinary until it isn't. I came home from work, my mind on dinner and deadlines, not heartbreak. Eric's old laptop, yes, his, the one he'd left behind when he moved his things out, was still sitting on the bookshelf. I hadn't touched it in weeks. But that night, a notification blinked to life on the screen. Curiosity isn't noble, it's human. I walked over. The message preview glowed from the corner of the screen. "Veronica, I wish I could be with you instead." I stared for a moment before clicking the thread open. Hundreds of messages. Months of them. Jokes, memories, complaints about me, promises about someday. Eric, "She's good to me, but it's different with you." Veronica, "I miss us." Eric, "Soon. I just need to figure out the right way to end it." I scrolled and scrolled until the words blurred. There it was, the truth I'd felt crawling beneath my skin for 3 years, finally written out in black and white. It wasn't paranoia, it was evidence. My first emotion wasn't rage, it was relief. Because now, finally, I wasn't crazy. When Eric came by the next day, I was ready. He walked in smiling, carrying coffee, casual as ever. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. "Do I?" I asked, and he froze at my tone. I set his coffee down, opened the laptop, and turned it toward him. "Want to tell me what this is?" He blinked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. "Elena, wait." I did wait, I said. 3 years. He started talking, fast, practiced, defensive. "It's not what it looks like. I was just venting. She was having a hard time, and you were telling her you wish you were with her instead?" His face drained of color. "You shouldn't have gone through my messages. You shouldn't have written them." He stepped closer, voice softening into that familiar weapon, remorse. "I love you. You know that." "No, I know you need me. That's different." He swallowed hard. "It was emotional. That's all. I didn't—" "You did enough," I said quietly. "You made me doubt my own instincts. You made me compete for your affection against someone you'd already chosen." He opened his mouth again, but I cut him off. "You said if I didn't like it, I could find someone else." "And?" I smiled faintly. "I did." He froze. "What?" "His name's Ben." For once, Eric didn't have a script. He just stood there, stunned, his hands tightening around nothing. Before he could speak, there was a knock at the door. I didn't flinch. Ben stood there in jeans and a plain gray hoodie, holding a small cardboard box, the last of my things from his apartment. He paused when he saw Eric, then looked at me. "Do you want me to wait outside?" "No," I said. "You're exactly where you should be." Eric's jaw clenched. "So this is him." "This is the man who doesn't make me feel like I'm auditioning for love," I said. Ben stayed silent, steady, his presence a quiet anchor. Eric's voice cracked. "You cheated on me." I laughed softly. "No, I stopped being cheated out of peace." He turned on Ben, desperate for someone to blame. "Did you plan this? Did you wait for me to screw up?" Ben met his gaze evenly. "You didn't need my help to do that." For a long, breathless moment, none of us spoke. Then I said, "It's over, Eric." He looked at me, eyes rimmed red. "You'll regret this." "No," I said. "I regret staying this long." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed once, then faded into the quiet. When the silence settled, Ben finally exhaled. "You okay?" "I think so," I said. "Mostly, I just feel done." He nodded. "Good. Done is the beginning of better." I smiled. "You sound like my therapist." Occupational hazard of listening, he said. 2 hours later, Veronica called. Unknown number. I let it ring once, then twice. On the third, I answered. Elena? Her voice was small, shaken. He told me you read everything. I did. I didn't mean for it to get that far. Then why did it? Silence. Because, she said finally, he always made me feel like I was the only one who really knew him. I know, I said softly. He told me the same thing. I could hear her crying quietly. I'm sorry, she whispered, for what I did to you. I'm not the one you need to apologize to, I said gently. Try apologizing to yourself. Then I hung up. That night, Ben and I packed. It didn't take long. Most of what I'd left at Eric's was replaceable. When we carried the last box to Ben's car, I looked up at my apartment building, at the windows where I'd once waited for messages that never came, at the walls that had heard more silence than laughter. Ready? Ben asked. I nodded. More than ready. He opened the passenger door and I climbed in. As we drove through the city, I watched the skyline slip past, the same skyline I used to stare at during arguments, trying to convince myself the view made the pain worth it. Now it just looked beautiful again. At a stoplight, Ben reached over, fingers brushing mine. You okay? Yeah, I said, just thinking. About him? No, I said, smiling. About me. About how I finally stopped confusing endurance for love. He squeezed my hand gently. Welcome back to yourself. When we reached his apartment, I carried the last box inside and set it down beside the door. He turned to me. What now? I looked around the space that had already begun to feel like home, the sketches on the walls, the soft hum of his playlist, the faint scent of cedar and coffee. Now, I said, we build. He smiled. Together? Always, I said. And this time, I didn't have to wonder if I meant it, because for once I wasn't the backup plan. I was the choice. Months passed. The kind of months that moved differently, slow, steady, deliberate. There were no explosions, no dramatic apologies, no grand gestures, just silence. The kind that means a story has ended for real this time. Eric stopped calling. Veronica stopped posting. And for the first time in years, my life didn't revolve around waiting for someone else's next move. Ben and I created new rhythms. Mornings with coffee and soft jazz, evenings with laughter that didn't come from effort, but from ease. He'd draft late at his desk, pencil tapping against the wood, and I'd edit reports beside him. Separate worlds, sharing the same air. Every so often I'd catch him watching me with that half smile, the one that said, "You're safe now, but also, you've always been stronger than you think." And for once I believed him. One night, as we walked home from dinner, I passed a jewelry store window and stopped. In the glass, my reflection stood beside his. We both looked calm, whole. He followed my gaze to the display, rings under perfect lighting, glinting like promises. You ever think about it? He asked quietly. About what? Making things permanent. I laughed softly. I used to think permanence was the goal. And now? Now I think peace is. He smiled. Peace can be permanent too. That night, when he kissed me under the glow of the streetlight, it didn't feel like a movie ending. It felt like a beginning that had been waiting patiently for me to catch up. A year later, I received an email from an unknown address. Subject, congratulations. The body read, heard you started your own consulting firm. You were always too good for me. I hope you're happy. V. I stared at the message for a long time, not out of anger, but out of gratitude. Veronica wasn't the villain of my story anymore. She was the mirror that showed me everything I needed to see about myself. I hit delete. Not out of cruelty, out of closure. 2 years later, Ben proposed. We were on a hiking trail just outside Portland, a place he'd once told me was a cathedral of light. The air smelled like pine and new beginnings. He stopped halfway up the trail, pulled something small from his jacket pocket, and knelt. Before I met you, he said, I built things that stood but didn't last. Then you taught me what it means to build something strong enough to breathe. I didn't let him finish. I said yes before he could even open the box. When he did, I laughed. It was simple. No diamonds, no glitter. Just a smooth gold band, quietly perfect. Later, I told him, you know what's funny? I used to think rings were proof someone wanted me. Now it's just a symbol of what I already know. He kissed my forehead. Exactly. Our wedding was small. 20 people, sunlight through glass, soft music, no performance. Just truth. During the vows, I said, thank you for never asking me to prove I'm worth loving. He said, thank you for choosing yourself first, because that's who I fell in love with. There were tears, laughter, and peace so thick you could almost touch it. When we danced, the world felt still. 5 years later, I sit in our home office, sunlight spilling across blueprints and coffee mugs. There's a crib in the corner, white wood, soft blanket. Our daughter Hope sleeps inside it, her tiny hand curled around the air like she's already holding the world. Ben walks in, barefoot, holding 2 mugs. She's finally asleep, he whispers. I smile. She gets that from me. He sits beside me, glancing at the documents on my screen. Working again? Just wrapping something up. He peers closer. What's the title? I grin. The Architecture of Love. He chuckles. Sounds like a bestseller. It already is, I say, leaning into his shoulder. Outside, the city hums. Inside, everything is quiet. Sometimes I think about the woman I used to be, the one who stayed too long, who mistook suffering for devotion, who thought love had to be earned. I don't hate her. She's the reason I can sit here now, in the calm, knowing what real love sounds like when it finally speaks. It doesn't beg, it doesn't compete. It just says, you're home. The morning Veronica told Eric to find someone else, she thought she was breaking his heart. She didn't know she was saving mine, because I did find someone else. Someone who chooses me every day without question or comparison. Someone who looks at me and doesn't see stability as boring, but as beautiful. And when our daughter laughs in her sleep, I whisper the lesson I wish I'd learned sooner. Love isn't about who you fight for. It's about who never makes you fight to be seen.